Hello and welcome to this eSchool News webcast. My name is Andrew Barber and I'm a senior contributing editor here at eSchool News, and I'm going to be acting as the moderator for today's presentation. And this webinar, I'll say, is the first in a three-part diverse learners series that is being sponsored by Fuel Education. And in this first installment, we're going to discuss some of the challenges facing ESL and how students in grades 4 to 8 can benefit from Fuel Ed's supplemental blended instructional curriculum. And before I hand things over to our speakers for today, I do want to just take a couple of moments to highlight some items about your console for the day. First, we will be recording the event, and in a couple of days, we'll send out an email to all of you that contains a link to the recorded event, and you'll also be able to download a PDF of the presentation from that same email. And second, please ask questions. Don't feel as if you have to wait until the end. At any time during the presentation, if you have a question, just type it into the Q&A box on your console and hit the submit button. And I hope we'll have 5 or 10 minutes at the end when our speakers can address your questions. We also have a chat function which can be launched via that blue group chat icon down at the bottom of your screen. And use chat to talk among yourselves or to contact me or the eSchool News team with any technical issues or any other concerns for that matter. But please don't use the chat function to ask our panelists questions. They're not going to have time to monitor the chats during their presentation. So if you do have a question for the panelists, again, please use the Q&A panel instead. And I also want to draw your attention to the additional resources panel on your console, where you can access a wealth of information about teaching ESL students, as well as Fuel Ed's digital curriculum. And don't forget to register for the remaining 2 webinars in the series by clicking on the link at the bottom of the panel that's titled Today's Sponsor. And with that out of the way, let me now introduce you to today's speakers. Erin Sivek is an English language arts is an English language arts and English as a second language teacher at the International Newcomer Center in Milwaukee Public Schools. I'm not seeing, I'm just going to pause right now. I'm not seeing the slide advancing. I'm going to try one more time. And, Erin, I will continue and we'll see if this clears itself up. But anyway, I'm going to come back to Erin. Erin Sivek is an English language arts and English as a second language teacher at the International Newcomer Center in Milwaukee Public Schools. And she currently serves as an ESL team leader and middle school refugee students from Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and Western Africa. And on top of all that, Erin has written and adapted curriculum for high school English language arts courses and driver's education, and she serves as webmaster for the Milwaukee Academy of Chinese Language. And our other speaker is Theresa Goodlett, an education solution specialist with Fuel Education. And in her role, Terry works with districts, schools, and instructors to plan and execute their online programs. And before joining Fuel Ed, Terry was a district world language coordinator and Spanish teacher, and she spent 3 years with Middlebury Interactive Languages supporting and coaching teachers. Welcome, Erin and Terry. It's a real pleasure to have you here today. Terry, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about Fuel Education?
Absolutely. Thank you, Andrew. So our mission, very simple. We want to partner with school districts because we want to fuel personalized learning and transform the education experience. And that's a very lofty way of saying that we want to serve students. Fuel Education is a large online curriculum provider, and we provide innovative digital curriculum, technology, instruction, and support enabling you to create a learning environment that's just right for your students. So in that capacity, we have paired with Milwaukee Public Schools to help support their English language learners. At this time, I'd like to introduce Erin so that she can talk a little bit and tell us a little bit, Erin, about your district and about your student population.
All right. Thank you, Terry. So the next 3 slides have some general and specific information about Milwaukee Public schools, so I'm going to share how those relate directly to our English learners. So Milwaukee Public Schools, or MPS, is the largest urban district in the state of Wisconsin. We currently serve over 73,000 students in our district, and about 1 in 10 of those students are identified as English language learners. MPS serves students with over 50 native languages, and some schools have over 20 language groups represented. We currently have 40 schools that have ESL programs in the classroom for pullout and inclusion. MPS also has 2 newcomer centers that are specific for refugee students where they can acquire English socially and academically. Our ultimate goal in the district is to transition these students into general education and for them to become fluent English speakers.
Thank you, Erin. So a little bit about the ELL program before we jump in. And our format today, which I'm really excited about, is that it's going to be a little bit more conversational and less presentational in manner, in that Erin and I are going to kind of talk about some different topics and hopefully find some topics that resonate with you as the audience. And as Andrew mentioned, please submit those questions because we would love to be able to answer those. Our ELL program, so our target audience is students in grades 4 through 10. We have a focus on academic English and literacy development. So that means we are going to be incorporating grade-level content. We want students to be successful in their content area classrooms, and the way that they're going to have a success in their academic classrooms is that they are going to experience the content that's on grade level. It's culturally inclusive, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more in detail as we go through. But we really want to engage students in some individualized task-based activities. We want them doing collaborative project-based learning as well. So we kind of have this all-encompassing project-based learning approach to English language learning. It's certainly research-focused. We were developed with PhD academics. We worked closely with Jim Cummins, if you're familiar with his work, and he really helped us to shape our curriculum. So, Erin, I'm going to go ahead and throw the first question to you, just a little bit, backing up a little bit about the district, and then we'll go into blended learning. But can you talk a little bit about your approach for English language instruction as far as a district goal? Like, do you have a district-wide approach, or does it tend to change from building to building? Maybe speak to the newcomer center a little bit.
Okay. So MPS has a very general district-wide approach for our EL instruction to be culturally and linguistically responsive to students throughout instruction. That is, whether they are with an English as a second language teacher or if they are in a general education classroom. So we're continuing to train educators across the district because, as you heard, over 1 in 10 of our students are native speakers of another language. We do vary school to school. Some schools have bilingual programs that are specifically for Spanish and English, whereas we have very many schools with ESL pull-out models. So at my school, I teach in the Newcomer Center, and all of our students are taught through sheltered instruction, where they travel throughout the day to 4 teachers who are dual licensed and certified in both a content area and in ESL. So my position as their English language arts teacher is to teach them writing and speaking through a sheltered model.
So talk a little bit more about that, and how you've approached the blended learning aspect. So was blended learning prominent in your school? Is this something that's kind of new to your school or district?
I can't speak directly to the district, but I know that my school is similar to many in that because of our high number of ESL students, we do have the funding to have a lot of technology support. So we have a lot of computer-based academic intervention programs, but they're not specifically designed in the blended learning approach. So this was new. When I was trained with Middlebury Interactive, it was new to me when I taught summer school, and I really like using this model because I can plan ahead with the PD materials that I'm given and then plan for which students I want to be working independently on the computers while I can be working with a small group, whether it's pre-teaching them vocabulary or having some of the higher English proficiency students discuss theme-related questions.
So I know in our courses we have some pre-teaching vocabulary activities that are built in as well to support that component of it online. What are some of the strategies you like to do to pre-teach vocabulary? Do you have a couple of go-to ones that you have found to be successful?
I do. I absolutely do. I use a specific graphic organizer that I made that looks like a table where they have a vocabulary term, a definition, and then examples with pictures. And that's often something that I do as a whole group, depending on their English proficiency level. Sometimes we create definitions together using examples, or if they're a lower LAU level student, then I do more of the leading. That's one of my go-tos. And then specifically with the online modules from Middlebury Interactive, we do a lot of annotating in the glossary and then add notes and pictures and discuss some of the examples that way. Wonderful.
So it sounds like a lot, you're really employing a lot of that modeling and observation strategies.
Very much of it. And yes, and we use different colors for different things, and it's very exciting because in the Newcomer Center we loop with our students. So I teach students sometimes when they're 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and they remember these methods that they've learned here, and then the next year they're able to show when a new student arrives, in the middle of November, they can show that student exactly how we're going to be annotating and taking our notes in class.
Sounds like a very supportive culture that you've built within the classroom.
Yeah, they do a great job working together and across cultures.
So let's change gears just a little bit. So talk a little bit about how project-based learning has impacted your instruction and some of your student outcomes.
All right, I'll start with how it's impacted my instruction. In my class, I don't have a specific curriculum because with each new group of students, we are not sure of what language levels we'll be receiving in the classroom. So sometimes planning is difficult because I can go anywhere, whereas with these materials, with these thematic units, I'm given kind of a forefront. So with my instruction, it's been very helpful to go onto the website to use the professional development materials that I can look through and see how they relate cross-curricularly to other content areas that I'm co-teaching in. And then when I plan my lessons, I can plan for using this program in my ELA class, but then if it's a social studies related theme, I can use it also during that time in order to meet all of the standards. So that part has been very helpful in my instruction. And then with the student outcomes, one of my favorite things about this is that the program includes rubrics and that it includes exemplar samples of the final projects that the students will be doing. So when they see the vocabulary and the reading throughout the theme, they're able to know what they're expected to have as their final outcome. And a lot of the projects are pretty engaging for the kids. They can always relate it to themselves in some type of way. My students have very high needs with their language levels and, from what they've experienced in their lives, and this gives them a really specific focus that they can look forward to completing.
So it sounds like you're doing a lot of integrating of the projects? I know we tried to do that when we were developing the thematic units, when we were working through the modules. We want students kind of breaking it down in pieces. Do you find that's how you're able to do it as well and incorporate it instead of this, well, let's just kind of stop now and do a project, which many, people who are first kind of exploring and getting into project-based learning, they don't really understand how to integrate the project. So it becomes this, okay, eventually we'll get to this point where we're going to stop and it's project time. So do you find that you're able to integrate it fairly seamlessly?
Yeah, well, and I've been that teacher in the past, especially when I was new. But
me too.
within our team of 4 teachers, we collaborate in the mornings before school begins, and I can hear from the science teacher and the health teacher, and then I can relate it to, in this program right now, we're learning about events that shaped me. How can we, tie that back into these other content areas? And my team of teachers loves being able to do that too, because it gives all of us more of a focus. So it's been really good for our students too, because it reinforces that Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 vocabulary that they're getting in my classroom and through this program, and then they can use it again in those other classes.
It always certainly makes it more stronger and more cohesive when we can do that cross-content planning. Do you find that the other content teachers are using the online components as well, or has that kind of been your baby, so to speak, that when using the Middlebury Interactive ELL courses, are the online components strictly in your classroom, or are you sharing some of that out?
I'm hoping this year that we can, our students just started last week, but I'm hoping that we can get there. During summer school this year, I used the program and worked closely with another teacher where we shared the students, and they were able to use this. She was had more of a science focus. So they did that during the summer. So some of them have asked, and do we get to do that this year? And we're getting there, but the teachers seem to like it, and the students, it's just very helpful, I think, for them to do it throughout their day. Wonderful.
One of the screens that I just put, or slides that I just put up on the screen right now is an example of one of our projects. So we have a wide variety, and as we mentioned, they're cross-curricular, so it could be math, English language arts, social studies, science. And I know at one point I was working with another district outside of Milwaukee, and when I spoke to them a little bit about projects and we were looking at this particular project, I know the reaction from the teacher was, if only I had thought about that project, so simplistic, but yet she struggled so trying to explain food chains and food webs to her middle school student. And so have you found that there have been some aha moments with your projects, making connections with the students? There was one specific one that I did at the end of the school year, and by that time, in May, we received about 20 new students, and getting very frustrated, and I was like, we're going to do the unit, the theme called Events That Shaped Me, and it was, I don't even know the word for it, how great it was for the new students and the students who had been here all along working on the similar project, and it really helped them get to know each other and see that, even though you're from Tanzania and I came from Malaysia 3 years ago, look at these similar things that we've experienced. The projects have been, and I really do, I love seeing them at the beginning and then seeing how my kids, some of them model what they see and some of them take it to a whole other place. But yeah, like this one you have on the screen, it's just like, seeing that ahead of time makes it so much more exciting and comprehensible too for the students to see something this way. And very tangible. Exactly. And the hands-on part of it. I'm sorry, go ahead. No, just the hands-on part. I mean, with this one that everyone is able to see right now, being able to
manipulate these different objects is something that's really helpful for ELLs to see that pattern and to be able to do it themselves.
And I think for a teacher, for me, I think what's really fun is when you start to take some of those components that you're really looking at what you're doing online, you're looking at what you're doing face-to-face, you're leveraging which one's going to benefit and what's more appropriate. So you have this project that they're physically doing, they're building components of it and preparing for it online, but then you get to extend it even further in the classroom. So now we have a variety of food chains, and you can do a fun rotation where they're scrambled up, and you have to sequentially and reinforce that over and over and over with different content, with different types of food chains, and really getting excited about sharing those projects offline and doing gallery walks and things along those lines.
Yeah, I like how you mentioned that, because when seeing this one, it takes me to one of our ELA projects when we're learning about prefixes and suffixes and how you can use, just something so simple as these styrofoam cups to, show what comes first, what comes last, and the root word.
It's a really good point about looking at how some of the projects may be able to be recreated or repurposed.
Exactly.
And then they still have context. Exactly. That's brilliant. So you've already kind of brought up the social-cultural connections with students, because I think as teachers, we've seen historically, I think I have seen shifts, and I'm very happy to see these shifts, but I think there is still a presence where the understanding is that you are here, you're learning English in spite of your other language. And we know from research and we know from best practices and just from the heart, we don't want to discount the home languages. We want them to embrace their culture, their home language, while learning English, making those connections, building up their literacy skills in both languages, or very often more than one language, which is why we often don't say first language. We talk about home language, what is mostly used in the home.
Right.
So, how have you talked a little bit already, but do you have some more examples about how those embedded sociocultural elements have played a role in your classroom?
Absolutely. One of the modules, the themes titled Names, was one that I used with my lower English proficiency students, and they, just heard sentences so simple spoken by children who spoke with accents in English, saying, names from different cultural backgrounds. And then, they hear someone who sounds kind of like they do, whereas here sometimes they speak, and not everyone is so friendly about hearing all these different accents. And when they could see the pictures and videos of children from around the world using English, but still speaking of their own culture, it's just something that seemed so simple, was so exciting for them. And then I do have one more example that happened during summer school this year. We were in the cultural heritage theme, and one of the questions had asked students to think about, read about, and write about art in their culture. And I had a lot of students asking, what do they mean? Art is art. It looks the same. And I have, various things in my classroom. I have a fabric wall hanging with elephants on it, and I grabbed that, and then I have a Jamaican painting that has some people painted in the picture, and asked my students, okay, where do you think this is from? The elephants, they're all guessing Asia. And then they guessed the other one was African. So they were able to discuss how did you know, or why did you think this piece of art, represented Asian culture, and, how does this Jamaican piece, you guessed Africa, it's not close to Jamaica, but those cultural influences, how did they get there? And they were so engaged, and then they were able to respond to it about, in Syria, a lot of the art I see has, Arabic writing. So it becomes very engaging when they get to see these things and then something clicks where they're able to do it from their own perspective.
I think you bring up a really good point in that was like a perfect example of higher order thinking and just really just kind of stopping and pausing. And I think sometimes you as a student may not be able to articulate, but that doesn't mean you can't comprehend. It doesn't mean you can't do the critical thinking, the higher order thinking skills, and trying to support students to help them communicate their knowledge. So when you're having these discussions, so you think of typically if you're having these discussions, we're thinking of a typical classroom, and we know what those look like. So are you providing sentence frames? Are they using a lot of single words? Are they how are they able to articulate and have these classroom discussions? Like, are you building and scaffolding on it within that class period and circling back on those sentence frame? What does that kind of look like?
Absolutely, yeah. Everything needs to be scaffolded. I don't think I mentioned the levels, and for anyone listening who's familiar with ELP, LEP, or LAU levels, that's the level of students' English proficiencies, and the highest levels of students that I teach is about a 2.2. So students are, for the most part, not able to articulate well in English, even when, like you said, Terry, they're having, critical thinking and higher level thinking. So I'll often I'll bring up the program either on the smartboard and show them a few different sentence frames that they can use, or put it on the whiteboard, and then it also can reinforce the real basics that we're learning in class. We're, starting our sentences with what, and then they can repeat back to me, capital letters, how we end with a period. And then the students who, are closer to a LAU level 1, I often can sit with them, or when I do have a paraprofessional aide to assist, who can work with a smaller group and have the kids repeat after you, and they can draw the art. And then, with one of the Syrian students that I had, the younger brother, he didn't know how to express it in English, so he wrote something out in Arabic, and the paraprofessional was able to model the writing for him of this, this is Arabic, and this, is what my art looks like. So we definitely provide a lot of sentence frames, and then reinforce the grammar and conventions that we're hoping that they acquire as they're learning English.
So it does sound like that at times you do bring in some home language support, but it sounds like primarily you are conducting the class in English.
Yeah, I mean, I speak Spanish as well, but I have 0 students who speak Spanish. So I have some who ask and who choose to try to use, Google Translate, which, we all know does not translate perfectly in any way, but often just even a word that they want to know, they can check there and then use that. So I have a few dictionaries that are in various languages, but quite a few of my students never received schooling, or they had interrupted schooling in their home countries. So they may not even be literate in their first language.
Yeah, that's a very common issue, the lack of literacy skills in a home language, and then trying to transition to a new language as well. So we do lose that comparison support. I know one of my favorite was a lot of modeling and a lot of working with, kind of giving a plug here for word reference, because it's wonderful in that, yes, they're getting it's online dictionary, so they're getting their definitions, they're seeing root words, they're seeing parts of speech, and how do you find the appropriate word, and then having those, they have like a discussion board attached many times to when people are trying, well, how is it used in this instance? And it's really neat to see the depth of language use versus just trying to translate, but really trying to find that word in context and using that resource. Yeah. Absolutely. we've talked about, do you run into, I know we've talked a little bit about use of home language. Have you, working with newcomers, are you running into students who want to stay in that silent period? I know that's very typical, and how do you work with students and kind of bring them out of that silent period? Have you experienced that?
Yes, it's very common, and I think one of the great things about having the newcomer center is when brand new students come, we often already have students from that language group within our program. They tend to, similar cultural groups arrive in Milwaukee. So, if I have new students who are Rohingya and speakers of that language, they often will have, a classmate who can assist them with various things. But then, as the teacher, you always try to create a very pleasant classroom environment for those students. And I find that I'm able to do that. And, some of it takes a lot longer than others, but they're still able to, show their proficiencies in various ways. But we give them their time. We don't try not to, force anyone, but and there's always, you can pull someone aside. Sometimes they want to, come aside with a friend and just repeat after their friend, and it's just another way for them to acquire English.
Building a nice comfort, safe zone where they are comfortable taking risks, right? As teachers and educators, we need to do that for our students. We need to make sure that they are willing to put themselves out there a little bit, and whether it's an English language learner or another student, that takes a special kind of development of the culture in your classroom. Do you find that, so in our courses we have that recording feature, and a lot of the activities that are open-ended, either practice or those that are assessments. So they have the option to, we will put both of those in there. The one that's on the screen right now looks like it's just an open-ended writing. But sometimes we have write or record or write and record. Have you found any success with, or have you even paid attention to that recording feature kind of being a nice bridge to, it's kind of your own space, you're recording, it's just you, no one else is hearing you. Does that help them bring out their comfort levels at all, or expedite that process to where they feel a little bit more comfortable, or is it just another avenue for them to express themselves?
It's funny because there's such a variety with how, I model that part, and then I played it back to the students, and they all laugh because I sound different when I'm recorded, and then I tell them, okay, now I want you to try it. So we do one where we all do it together and listen, and then I have some students who really want to do it, in the hallway or in a corner of the classroom, and then I have some students where they say or, express that it's embarrassing. So then I'll sit with them and say, okay, well, pretend you're telling me. Like, tell me first what you want to say, and then we'll do it again, and you'll hit record. So it varies, but for the most part, they want to do the speaking part. It's just the way of how they choose to go about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I even found that was difficult sometimes with students who are, certainly not English language learners, but are learning a second language. And it's that comfort factor. It's a different level, and it's a different world, but it's still there. But I found that even with English language learners, that ability to listen and re-record and listen to re-record, it was amazing to me the number of times they'll re-record so they get it just where they want it. And I think that's wonderful because they're taking that ownership and they're taking that responsibility upon themselves. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree.
So you've already talked. Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm just agreeing with you that it's great to see how when they do that I don't like how this sounds, and then they perfect it, and they feel a little bit of pride with that. So
they do. That I think they build that confidence and feel a little bit more prepared to deal with the ambiguity and spontaneity once they're apart from that recording feature. Like they start to build up that confidence and that comfort level. They've had some practice. You of course, we've already talked about, you mentioned earlier about portfolio of writing tasks and projects. And I know you mentioned to me a little bit about how the online themes complement other strategies and materials you use for instruction and scaffolding. And we have already talked a little bit about how you drive your curriculum, and it's a little bit different at your center. So I know you mentioned once that you were talking about an argumentative writing task that you did.
Yes, and that one was with my my higher level students, where we skipped ahead in the themes because it just worked well in my health class. We were learning about cyberbullying and how we can avoid it and prevent it. And conveniently, there were 2 themes on social media and cyberbullying. So we had already had quite a few activities in our health class where we had, come up with ideas surrounding these 2 topics. And then they were able to go back into this program to use some of the ideas here to focus on their argumentative writing task, whether the question they approached was, should students under age 16 use Facebook? Or, should you be able to block, someone? Or do your parents need to give you permission? So they were able to tie these themes into the argumentative writing task from the portfolio. I do.
I'm kind of speechless. I mean, I think this is a fantastic connection. I love how you tied all of that together.
No, it was, and I love that was available for me because, like I said, my curriculum was with this center. We all created a portfolio that did have to be matched to the Common Core state standards. So we created those, and then it was like, okay, well now what actual content am I going to use? So it was great having those themes available to us. And then, we also have narrative and descriptive writing tasks, and we could tie those in with, we did one with cultural heritage. That was very easy to do a descriptive writing task, a biography or an autobiography. So the themes work in well. I can always find a way to relate them to our portfolio of writing tasks.
Wonderful. I appreciate you sharing that. That was really neat. I'm going to change gears a little bit because you are having, as you've given us examples today, it's very obvious that you're very purposeful in your planning. You're looking at your resources. You're looking at what you can leverage face-to-face, what you can leverage with the online components. How would you respond when someone would look at content face value and say, this is too rigorous? So how would you say you're going to raise the students up to content versus giving into that watering down of content to make it super easy manageable? Because I know that's a struggle for a lot of teachers of English language learners, is that how do you find that spot where you want to bring the students up and not bring the content too far down?
Right. Well, the program, for students with, very, very low English proficiencies, it is very rigorous, which is a great thing, but also a very big challenge. I do spend so much time with the pre-teaching of vocabulary and using, different strategies in the classroom with how to do that, of what, an example of what it is and what it's not. And, having students get up and, move to a side of the room, getting them, having them be interactive with it so it, becomes part of them, ingrained in their head. We use a ton of visuals, pictures, graphics. The students, they like to do skits to demonstrate, their understanding of things. But again, a lot of that happens. It happens before we even, log on to the program. And then I try to use texts that the district has adapted, whether they're adapted for ELLs or not, that we can pull in that also relate to the curriculum we're learning.
So we've talked a lot about the students, the curriculum, instruction. How do you connect with your students' families? What supports are in place for you guys to support the learning at home, family involvement, both at home, at school, outreach, kind of that holistic community involvement? What does that look like with your classroom or for you in your building?
Okay. Well, I'm fortunate enough that we're in a big enough city where we have quite a few events that the students participate in that I'm often invited to, or if I know, I'll just try to show up so I can get to know the families. This summer I went to a few different weddings of, fortunately not my students yet, but some of their siblings. I've gone to homes for dinners, and one of my students often will be the interpreter between me and his mother. We go to their soccer games and sit with the parents who can go, and we don't always have that common language, but so we can see each other in the community and have that comfort. And then our district uses an interpreter service that we use to communicate with the families. So sometimes during these morning team meetings, we'll make parent phone calls through language line, and whether it's just a general conversation of this is how he's doing in school, or if it's to let them know, we have our open house coming and you should attend. So a lot of our families know each other, and the ones who have come into school, they encourage the others to come in. So we do have a pretty strong communication with most families. And then if we're not able to reach someone, we have great support staff that we can ask them, please just go to this home, check in, and then they can use that interpreter service to let them know that we're here. This is where the school is. If you ever want to stop in, see what your child is learning, we're happy to have them here.
Well, I know it wasn't your intent in telling that some of this, what you just told me, but I really cannot let it pass and say that you really should be applauded, because if you're being invited to family weddings and dinners, then that means you're really connecting on your students on a level that we should be, but many oftentimes as educators we don't. And I just think that that's going to speak volumes to how your students are performing as well, because it's just amazing to me that you've gone to some family weddings and they weren't even prior students, it's family of the students. So I have to just recognize you publicly and say, well done. I mean, that's not even enough, but definitely well done.
Well, thank you. I mean, that makes me a little emotional, but it's really a beautiful experience, to get, to be so connected to these cultures that a lot of us had never even heard of, until they arrived in our cities. So.
Yes, you said in language earlier that I'm going to circle back and find out more about, because I did not recognize the word that you said. So I'm going to learn something new today for sure.
Wonderful.
So unless there's something else you want to kind of add, Erin, at this point, I think we've gone through several different avenues of questions. I'll go ahead and kick it back to Andrew, unless you have anything else that you'd like to add at this point.
Nope, I think we can take it back to Andrew.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Erin and Terry, for really an excellent conversation, and I will echo Terry's comments about what a tremendous job you must be doing, Erin, to be invited into homes and into personal lives. So congratulations on that. We still have some time left, so we're going to turn to some of the audience questions. Now, before we do that, I realized as I looked at the group chat that some people were having some problems getting the slides to move forward, or some audio problems as well. And so I just want to remind everyone, first of all, I apologize for that, but I also want to remind everyone that we will be sending out that email that will have a link to the recording of this, and you'll be able to see and download the presentation and hear the recording at your leisure. Also, if you want to have a personalized demonstration of the fuel lead system, there is a demo request button on their homepage, which is fueleducation.com. So if you had any problems today or want to follow up and take the next step to get a demo, those are some of the options for you. But for those who had problems, I apologize. So let's move on to the questions. And Erin, I'm going to come right back to you. We have a question from Mary who says, what is the best training for teachers who will be working with older ELL students? They have some students enrolling for next semester, 11th and 12th grade. Does that change how you approach things?
For me personally, I do have a background in high school. My first 3 years, I taught sheltered English language arts. Regarding this specific program, I know you said it only reaches up to 10th grade, but if someone is looking for, specific activities, there are the SIOP model books. I know 99 Ideas and Activities is one of my go-to books for strategies to use in the classroom or any SIOP model training.
Okay. While we're on the subject of SIOP, are there, a question from Chantel coming in, are there any specific SIOP strategies that you personally find work very well?
There are quite a few that I use. One of the most basic, but one of my favorite ones are using specific graphic organizers, especially tables. Seem to work for my students. I've gone through, it was such a buzzword when I first started teaching, graphic organizers, but my students tend to do better with linear rather than web type of models in the classroom. I can't speak to why. And then I do a lot of color coding with vocabulary cards is a big thing where with the strategy I spoke of earlier with pre-teaching vocabulary. In my classroom, with highlighters, we always do a definition in yellow. We do examples highlighted in pink. Again, something very basic. And then with the higher level students, I really like the list group label with vocabulary terms, whether you are grouping them because of what tier they fall into or what part of speech. Those are just a few examples of what I really like to use.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to move on now to a question that came in from Brian, and that is, do you have any advice to help reach students with low levels of language acquisition in their native language in content classes?
Could you repeat that last part? I'm sorry.
Okay. Do you have any advice to help reach students with low levels of language acquisition in their native language in content classes?
Yes. One of them would involve if you have access to technology, Google Read and Write. That's something I would write down if you're not familiar with it. Has been incredibly beneficial in my classroom, where you don't have to, Google search an image. You can use this program and you are able to view a word translated. You can have a word read to you. You can click on a picture dictionary, a definition. So again, that's Google Read and Write is a big thing that helps the lower LAU level students. And that was new to me last year, and that's become a big one.
Okay.
Otherwise,
terrific.
just
all right, well,
a lot of pictures.
Okay. All right, Terry. Let me come over to you, and maybe you could talk about how long it takes to complete projects, and then I'll kick it over to Erin maybe to add her part into this. But would you be able to tackle that?
Sure. So you said how long it typically takes to complete projects?
Yes.
So if you look at the online modules in and of themselves, we have enough online activities in our courses that would equate to about a week of instruction if a student met every day, so 5 days, about an hour-ish a day. Now that doesn't include, so our product is supplemental, so it is designed to be used with the face-to-face teacher in a blended environment. So as an educator, of course, we want to kind of hone in on those numbers and say how long do they take. So if you were looking at face value of the online components only, you're looking at about a week's worth of content and working towards those projects. Of course, it's very common that not only do you have, depending on how much scaffolding you might have to put into place offline to support the project, to support student learning, very often English language learner classrooms, even if they are a self-contained classroom, have a variety of proficiency levels in them. So sometimes you might find that projects take a little bit longer with some students and then with others. And so you have that flexibility with the blended learning component for that. But what we're seeing with most of our implementations is that they are spending about 2 weeks on a theme. Erin, I'm not sure how long you've spent. Of course, most of our courses, we have Erin's using it in a newcomer center, so she's building in a lot of scaffolding. So I would say typical for course level, on-grade level, aligned to the proficiency levels that go with that course, about 2 weeks spent in a theme. Erin, how long are you kind of spending on those projects and theme learning?
You just said it. We spend about 2 weeks, but that also, and that's about an hour a day. But that also does include, like you said, a lot of the scaffolding and the activities that we do outside of the program.
Great. Well, let me come back to you, Terry, again with a follow-up. Are the projects the only assessments, or are there other assessments built in as well?
Great question. So the projects are the culminating assessment, of course. So we're going to make sure that we're incorporating reading, writing, speaking, and listening. So they're also going to be doing some presentational pieces with that as well, an interpersonal and an interpretive. But we do have in each of our modules, we have exit tickets that we put in or comprehension checks. And they're going to be, some are going to be computer graded, and then some are going to be open-ended. So those forced choice questions where we have a lot of different tech-enhanced items in our courses, drag and drop, drop-down arrows for multiple choice, radio buttons, true and false, a little bit of everything. So those are going to be computer graded, and they'll get immediate feedback. And then the open-ended ones will have to go, whether it's written or speaking, will go to the teacher to grade and provide feedback. So they will touch on those within each of the modules. And then we would have what is more of a typical assessment that's really going to hone in a little bit on grammar and vocabulary in the last module right before they complete their project. So we do have a little bit of both.
Okay, terrific. All right, thank you very much. Well, we have about 6 minutes left. A couple of other questions. During the presentation, Terry, you asked Erin about whether she was about the online component and whether she had involved other teachers and so on. I'll start with you, Terry, and then maybe Erin, you can chime in. It's about involving other teachers and getting them comfortable with the online component. Have you found specific strategies or professional development strategies that have worked particularly well? And how do you suggest other educators approach the issue of involving other teachers and getting them on board and comfortable?
Sure. So we do a lot of blended learning, professional development, professional learning. Mm-hmm. And, blended learning is a huge bucket. Some like to pick a certain blended strategies like flipped classroom, or they want to do station rotation. I was more of one of those teachers that did a little bit of everything, so it was blended learning, but some days the lesson for me, the content and learning really was drove that it made more sense to do a station rotation, or it made more sense to do a flipped classroom. But we do have like pre-recorded modules. We do on-site coaching or on-site professional development days based around blended learning. But one of my roles, which I really love, is I get to talk with educators, whether it be at the district level, the classroom level, the building level, and we really talk about your students and we talk about your needs. And so that way we can kind of customize that PD, because it really is not cookie cutter. And it's not one size fit all. And just like students, teachers are in different places in their careers and what they need. So I do feel that a coaching model and that kind of we all know that ongoing professional development is very important, not just show up for a seminar and leave. So it's that ongoing coaching and reflection piece, I think, is what's really solid.
Okay. All right. Erin, do you have anything to add to that?
I have one thing to add in that, as I mentioned earlier, my school has a lot of online academic intervention programs that we have licenses for and access to. And so, you know, when I first brought this up, the first thing that they ask some of my colleagues who have taught for 20 years, more years than I have, how much extra time, you know, in like enrolling the students. And that part of it, you know, time is always a very big thing for us teachers, and that part of it is very easy, very straightforward. And anytime I've had an issue, I have gotten a response from Middlebury or Fuel, you know, within, I want to say, less than an hour almost. So it's a very and I had good training in it too. So it's a very user-friendly program, I think, as an educator.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good to hear. And we are down to 3 minutes left for our, so we probably have time for one final question, and I will address it to Erin, but then Terry, if you have a follow-up, please chime in as well. And one of the audience members wants to know, he says he runs an EL collaborative with county educators, and they meet monthly, and it's a combination of new and experienced EL teachers. And his question is, what would you suggest we focus on as a collaborative group?
I guess I would want to ask if that is in regards to students or in regards to teaching specifically.
Go with whatever you feel you want to, because I can't reach out to them.
Okay. I guess one of the big things here for especially, well, for new and experienced, because the EL population changes so often with their language and cultural backgrounds, in that first knowing the students' backgrounds in order to engage them better, and then I'm seeing that it's in regards to teaching.
Teaching, yes.
I say, yeah, would be to try to keep up to date with. Let me reread this combination. Collaborative group. Just on what's available to us. So I mean, every so often when we meet, we look up. I'm not sure if California, if it's part of WIDA, where there's a ton of
California ELD.
Materials. Okay. That's sorry. Go ahead, Terry. You sound like you have some answer.
Oh no, I was just saying they're not a WIDA state; that it's ELD. But we all have the proficiency and being up to date. You're right on track. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, just with how those are updated. I mean, they updated the speaking portion just this last year, and we're still waiting for a training on fully how to understand that. So just, I would say, staying up to date with both the government level and then the state level, all the changes that are happening in order to address where we are at with our understanding.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. That, unfortunately, is all the time that we have left for today. If any of you did ask a question that we didn't get to, someone from the Fuel Ed team will follow up with you directly to get you some answers. But as we wrap up, I want to thank Erin Sivek and Theresa Goodlett again for an excellent presentation, actually more of a conversation. And I would also like to thank Fuel Education for its support. And just one final reminder, particularly for those who had any problems with audio today, we will be sending out an email to everyone who attended when the recording of the webinar is ready. Thank you, and I hope to see you all back for the second webinar in the series on September 26th. Goodbye.